Paul Reubens, the man who continued to play. On Sunday, July 30th, 2023, Paul Reubens made his final exit from the stage. He was 70 years old. After a 6-year covert battle with cancer that few anyone was aware of, he passed away at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. He was known to everyone as Pee-wee Herman, the red-lipped, high-voiced, bow-tied man-child who, in the 1980s and 1990s, made millions of people laugh till they sobbed. However, the man behind the gray suit and the light-hearted shriek was a quiet, kind, and incredibly gifted person who devoted his last years to shielding those he cared about from the horrors of sickness. Acute myelogenous leukemia, AML, accompanied by metastatic lung cancer, was the cause. One silent, heartbreaking surrender, two distinct struggles, two cancers. Paul Reubens's two cancers. Paul Reubens died as a result of two distinct cancers banding together to attack a guy who had refused to mature during his whole life. Acute myelogenous leukemia, AML, a vicious blood disease that strikes like a freight train, was the first. When it first came in 2017, it had bone pain that felt like fire, bruising that blossomed overnight, and a white cell count so high that the lab frantically summoned the doctor. Paul vanished into chemotherapy chairs and hospital rooms for 2 years, losing weight, hair, and the capacity to laugh aloud without splitting his lips. In 2009, he beat it into remission, notified very few people, and returned to work wearing the same red bow tie and smiling in private. The second malignancy was lung cancer, which was discovered in 2020 at stage 4. Paul never smoked, so it had nothing to do with that. It was just bad luck. It began in the right lung and progressed to the liver, brain, and bones. Immunotherapy delayed certain tumors, radiation reduced others, but nothing halted the silent advance. The leukemia, which had never completely disappeared, reappeared in 2023 with new mutations and resistance. It was referred to the doctors as double-hit cancer. Paul described it as rude. Ultimately, the malignancies overpowered a body that had already expended all of its resources without having to battle one another. His bone marrow was destroyed by the leukemia, causing his blood to lose its ability to clot and fight infection. Every breath was a negotiation due to the tumors in his chest caused by the lung cancer. His spine was undermined by metastases until he was unable to stand, and then he was unable to sit without screaming. The agony was eventually relieved by morphine, but the sparkle in those enormous, childlike eyes was also diminished. The figures plummeted early on July 30th, 2023. Oxygen saturation was declining, platelets were close to zero, and the heart was pounding to keep up with a body that was exhausted. The physicians questioned him about his desire for drastic measures. Paul mustered a final Pee-wee grin and shook his head, barely able to mutter, "I'm ready for the big chair in the sky." Paul's heart gave one last weary beat and stopped at 11:17 p.m., with his brother's hand in his, and the Playhouse theme playing on a tiny speaker. The war that the cancers had launched 6 years prior had been won. They stole his future, his power, and his breath. However, they never once stole the happiness. Paul Reubens' body was taken by cancer. Pee-wee never got it. The man who turned childhood into a superpower, who thought laughter was holy, and who guarded the greatest secret of his life so the rest of us might continue to smile, was never reached. The bow tie remains motionless. The laugh track never ends. Paul Reubens believes that the show never truly finishes. So somewhere, in a playhouse created entirely of his imagination, a child wearing a gray suit and a red bow tie is dancing as if no one was watching. Paul, I appreciate your laughter. We'll continue it for you. Mecca heiny ho, Mecca lecca hi, indefinitely. The initial covert conflict, 2017-2019. In the spring of 2017, it began. At 64, Paul was enjoying a spectacular recovery. Pee-wee's Big Holiday recently debuted on Netflix to overwhelmingly positive reviews. He was doing voice acting, guest parts, and sold-out live performances. He had a sense of invincibility. Then came the unrelenting exhaustion, the unexpected bruises, and the nocturnal sweats that soaked the blankets. In May, a routine blood test revealed all the problems. Platelets in the basement, white cells through the roof, acute myelogenous leukemia, an aggressive blood malignancy that strikes quickly, was diagnosed by a bone marrow biopsy. He received weeks without treatment and months with it from the doctors. Paul asked his oncologist, "Can we keep this quiet? I want no one to be concerned." He started intense treatment after checking into Cedars under his birth surname, Rubenstein, Paul. Mouth sores and sickness have muted the famed laughter, and hair and weight have vanished. The only people who knew were his brother Luke, his manager Kelly, and Brina, the widow of Phil Hartman. He declared to the public that he was taking a little break to recharge. While his body struggled for survival, he vanished from talk programs and red carpets for 2 years. In 2019, he managed to put his leukemia into remission. With a bowl of secret stadium sauce from the vintage Pee-wee Playhouse set and a self-promise to use every second if I get more time, he quietly rejoiced. 2023. The Second Hidden War. He was given an additional 3 years. Then came a persistent cough in early 2020. When a scan was requested for something unrelated, it lit up like a Christmas tree. Stage 4 lung cancer has already spread to the brain and bones. Physicians think it was unrelated to the leukemia and a second main cancer. Paul shrugged as he examined the pictures and remarked, "Well, Pee-wee always said, 'I know you are, but what am I?' Cancer must be playing the same game." He would not allow the news to go out. Because he wanted to maintain his mental clarity for the people he loved, he refused to take painkillers that would impair his judgment. For the next 10 years, he recorded voicemails for each friend's birthday. He penned letters to be read at upcoming weddings, opening nights, and childbirths. He completed a covert screenplay that was never shot. He traveled back and forth between his Los Feliz residence and Cedars for private clinical trials, immunotherapy, and radiation. Because you never know, he stored the collection of perfectly pressed bow ties in the closet. The last months. The tumors had united by the spring of 2023. After years of dormancy, the leukemia reappeared. His brain and liver were affected by the lung cancer. He was in the hospital more often than not. He eventually lost the capacity to stand and walk on his own. Even though his well-known voice became a whisper, the cadence, that distinctive Pee-wee rhythm, remained. He continued to chuckle. "Mecca lecca hey, mecca hiney ho," is how nurses said he greeted each blood draw. He fixed the props department from 30 years ago, when watching old Playhouse shows with pals. He requested that the lights be turned down and that the original Pee-wee's Playhouse theme be played on low level when his pain kept him awake. It was like coming home, he added. The final week. The physicians informed him it would be days, not weeks, in late July. Paul requested a final trip home. In the living room with a view of the hills, they set up a hospital bed. Friends arrived in stages. In between oxygen puffs, he cracked jokes while holding court in pajamas and a red bow tie. He asked everyone to leave the room on Saturday night, with the exception of his brother Luke. They spent an hour conversing. Luke emerged both smiling and crying, yet no one knows what was said. He was too weak to say much more than a whisper on Sunday morning. He gestured for a notepad and pen. He penned 2 notes. The following day, the first was made public. "My dear friends and fans, I have loved you all so much and enjoyed making art for you. It's time for the big adventure, but I've battled hard. Please don't stop laughing. The greatest present you could offer me is that. I adore you. Look out for one another. Paul and Pee-wee." The second note was exclusively intended for those in his immediate vicinity. "Thanks for letting me keep the secret," was all that was written. "Go act foolish for me now." That afternoon, he went into a coma. Paul Reubens let the curtain down at 11:17 p.m. on 30th of July, while the Playhouse theme played quietly on repeat. When the world heard the news, it realized it had permanently lost its favorite kid. However, a man wearing a gray suit and red bow tie is still dancing and laughing someplace in a playhouse that only exists in our memories, reminding us that while growing up is completely elective, growing old is a must. To keep the rest of us laughing, Paul Reubens maintained the greatest secret of his life. The laugh track will never finish as a result.